is called All Electric Apartments, and is part of our North Sydney Council Electrify North Sydney program, where we're helping and assisting the community, residents, businesses, and especially strata to move to an all-electric future. So welcome tonight and thanks for joining us. I firstly just like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands that we're meeting today, the Camaragal people, and pay our respects to their elders past, present, including those who might be in attendance today. So just to let you know that the webinar will be recorded and will be used as a resource and put on YouTube for people to watch later, and we'll also send that out to all the registered attendees. Part of the webinar tonight, we will have a chat function, so you're welcome to use that to post links and general comments. The Q&A function is where if you'd like to pose a question to Brent, feel free to add that question there. You can upvote it, and that pushes it to the top. And if that's the most popular question, that's one more answer the first. So yeah, that's pretty much all the housekeeping. So thanks again for joining us. I'd just also like to introduce our special guest tonight, Brent Clark from Wattblock. So thanks, Brent, for joining us. Brent is the CEO and founder of strata energy consultancy Wattblock. We've been working with Brent for many years now as part of the Future Proofing program. Wattblock has assisted over apartment buildings housing over 75,000 residents with solar, EV charging and energy efficiency over the past 7 years. Brent has worked with 9 local councils, 7 universities and 2 state governments on making strata buildings smarter. He has degrees in science, law, applied finance, MBA, and is an accredited Neighbours for Apartment Building Assessor. So thanks again, Brent, for joining us tonight and welcome.
Thanks so much, Jordan, and it's great to be here. Would you like me to share some screens now?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. So... Are we off and running?
Yep, good to go.
Okay, great. So welcome everyone for All Electric Apartments. And I have to say this is a very large topic. So we're going to be moving really quickly through some of these slides tonight. But as Jordan said, the video will be recorded on YouTube and the slide pack can be sent out to the attendees afterwards. So I won't spend time going through the contents. We'll just jump straight into it. So first of all, what's the motivation for apartment electrification? And we've heard now people like Saul Griffith with the Rewiring Australia and the need to electrify everything. And the idea really works on a number of different dimensions. It works on a health dimension, on an environmental dimension, and probably most importantly, on a back pocket cost savings dimension as we're in a cost of living crisis. So when it comes to apartment buildings and electrification, you have to approach it in 2 pieces. You've got to look at the common areas of the building and the individual apartment electrification. And keep in mind, from a cost perspective, the best time to upgrade to efficient electric infrastructure is basically in line with the end of life of any existing gas systems or upon any failure. And also, if you can coordinate it with other major plan works in the building, like the facade of the building or a roof upgrade if you're putting solar in, that's the best time to move forward with electrification. So just to let you know, the ACT, Victoria, Parramatta Council, Waverley Council and City of Sydney have all made moves towards having new developments not being connected to the gas network. And we'll jump in now and we'll have a look at the process for electrifying our apartments. So we would say step 1, you've got to get a handle on where the existing fossil fuel systems are inside your apartment building. So we call that review and engage. Step 2, you've got to plan and prepare. So the important thing is none of these retrofits really happen overnight. And just to get in context, if, for example, you want solar panels on the roof of your apartment building, give your apartment building an 18-month to 2-year horizon to work through that. And even if you're doing upgrades inside your own apartment, remember that these, for some of these upgrades, if you're installing a new air conditioner or installing an air conditioner for the first time, you'll need to get approval through your owner's corporation before you install that, if you don't have one installed already. So when it comes to deliver, you want 3 quotes from reputable installers, and then after you've installed the new technology that will reduce your gas or fossil fuel reliance, you have an optimization process, and we'll come back to that, what that means, a bit of a fine-tuning process, and then finally turning off gas and disconnecting gas either from your own apartment or, in the best example, from the entire apartment building. So one of the things that we just have to understand as we embark on this journey is the difference between individual lot property and common property. And here's a diagram that we've reused from Bannerman's Lawyers, who are a North Sydney-based strata law firm. And it gives an indication as to what items are individual lot property, what are common property, and probably the one that's most confusing when we try to electrify our apartment buildings is hot water. So hot water could be a centralized service which can't be upgraded by the individual apartment owner on their own. But in some townhouses or older apartment buildings from the 60s or 70s, you might have your own hot water service or hot water tank for your own apartment or lot. So you can fully embrace decarbonisation and electrification in those buildings. So first thing is understand for your own building the difference between individual lot property and common property. And if you're in a more modern apartment building, find out whether you've got a hot water meter, and then that would give you an indication as to whether you've got a centralised hot water service and whether the hot water is individually metered. Now, the next thing, inside our apartment, do we have gas appliances? Do we have gas cooktops? Do we have gas ovens? Do we have bayonets on our balconies where we're connecting up gas barbecues? So the first thing is an audit of your internal apartment. We've got to find out where these gas items are. And probably the one that is of most interest and people have the most control over is moving to an induction cooktop. Now, an induction cooktop, there's a wide range of induction cooktops that you can install into your apartment building. They can range from $600 to $2,200, but maybe there's a luxury model that's even $8,000. Now, the thing that you've just got to be cognizant of if you're moving to an induction cooktop is the amperage that is used by the induction cooktop. And that could be somewhere in the range of 20 amps to 48 amps. Now, in some apartment buildings in the North Sydney area, we've actually come across some really old apartments that have a limit of like 16 amps for the entire apartment. And in those buildings, at the moment, until a supply upgrade is done to the building, you wouldn't be able to retrofit even a normal electric cooktop, let alone an induction cooktop. But in other buildings that are a bit more modern, you might have a 63 amp single phase meter for your apartment, and you could comfortably handle a 20 amp induction cooktop. So just to give you a little bit more detail on the savings that you might get and the relative efficiency of different cooktops. So on one end, we've got LPG, 39.9% efficient. As we move through electric coil cooktops, 73.7, electric smooth cooktop, 74, and then the best efficiency is electric induction cooktop. And you can do all your cooking for an entire year for about $35 with one of those. Now, the next thing is, do you have gas heating or not? Now, the presence of a gas bayonet, say on the inside of the apartment somewhere, is the indicator of whether you actually have the ability to use a gas heater today or not. And you know, not every apartment has a gas bayonet. In fact, some of our older buildings don't have gas connected to the individual apartments at all. But probably the buildings that are built from the 1990s onwards, at least, you know, until about five years ago, a lot of those have gas bayonets, and people have the option of doing gas heating. Now, the thing that we want to bring out tonight is that reverse cycle air conditioning is the electrified method of heating your apartment. And while reverse cycle air conditioners use electricity, they're actually a very efficient way to heat an apartment. So if you were someone that had a gas heater and you were using a gas bayonet and a gas heater, it's actually more efficient to get rid of that gas heater and install a reverse cycle air conditioner and use the heating mode from the reverse cycle air conditioner in order to heat your apartment. And that's because the reverse cycle air conditioners are a form of heat pump. And we'll come back and we'll talk a bit more about heat pumps later on. Now, the next thing as we're auditing our apartments is, do you have gas hot water for your individual apartment that is just dedicated to your own individual apartment? And to be able to find this out, you might see one of these instant gas systems strapped to the side of the building, typically outside one of the windows of your apartment, or potentially on your balcony. Or if you're a ground floor apartment or more of a townhouse complex, you might find your gas hot water storage tank at ground level. And so if you have either of these options, then even though you live in strata, you have the ability to electrify and upgrade these to the more efficient version of heating hot water, which is a heat pump. So on the screen here, we can see in a ground floor setting, this is a heat pump that heats hot water, which is stored into this hot water storage tank. And just think, the technology of a heat pump or a reverse cycle air conditioner is actually the same technology. They're just working in reverse. And the heat pump and the reverse cycle air conditioner are efficient, and they are the electrified version that we want to be moving to in the future as we electrify our apartment buildings. Now, if you have this standalone hot water setup, you're in a townhouse or another older apartment building that has a ventilated hot water system, or a hot water system that you can ventilate. Maybe it's in a stairwell that's not inside your own apartment, or not, if it's not underneath the sink or in an enclosed cabinet. These are some of the savings that you can actually get. You can see the individual heat pump is much more efficient just on its own because it's using the ambient air temperature, sucking that in, and you're getting free heating of the hot water just from the heat island effect of North Sydney. And also, you're not paying daily connection fees to the gas distribution network. So you're saving on metering costs, and you're also saving on the energy that's used to heat the water. So here's just a diagram, and this is a depiction of how we think we've got to move forward in terms of completing the electrification now of the common areas of the strata building. So we've been having a look at a number of items that are more in the individual apartment, and now we're transitioning into what's sometimes called the base building, and we have to keep going and completing the electrification of the base building as well, and that's how we totally electrify our apartment building. So we want, if we've got common hot water systems that are gas today, we want those to move to electric heat pumps. We want pools that are heated by gas heating systems today to be moved to electric heat pumps. We want to get the solar panels onto the roof. We want to get the batteries into the building. And of course, another fossil fuel is the petrol that's going into our internal combustion engine vehicles. And we want to be upgrading that as we upgrade our cars, so that we move to using electric vehicles, and we have EV charging in our apartment buildings that allows us to charge the electric vehicles. So just to sort of go up a level, this is some mapping of the progress of electrification in strata buildings across about 10 different high density local government areas of Sydney. And if we look in total across these 10 different local government areas, we're at about solar penetration of about 1.9%. But keep in mind, these are probably the 10 local council areas that are closest to the city, that have probably had the most local council support over the last decade, and probably have higher rates of install of solar and other items compared to the rest of the strata buildings throughout New South Wales or Australia. But solar, we might be getting to about 1.9% penetration. And just to compare that with our standalone houses, they're at about 37% penetration at this point in time. So you can see that strata's still got a long way to go to catch up and electrify when it comes to the head start that standalone houses have. But batteries are still fairly early. Heat pumps still fairly early in the piece when it comes to our apartment buildings, but we're going to see more of them coming into the market over the coming decade. Now, we'll just point out, this is just in the last couple of months, in July, some larger solar systems have started to be installed on the rooftops of strata buildings. This one's over in Rhodes, and there are two twin sister towers there that both put 70 kilowatt solar systems on. So they're part of the same strata complex, and you've got now 140 kilowatts of solar. So solar is starting to be installed at larger size systems on our strata buildings, and different batteries are getting installed into the strata buildings, and these are different brands. In particular, this is a photo of a Sungrow battery that's installed into a strata building in Neutral Bay in the North Sydney area, but also batteries from Alpha ESS, BYD and Tesla are making, these are all photos from strata buildings in the Greater Sydney area, which are now installing the batteries. Here's a case study from Camperdown, and the thing that's interesting about the electrification journey of this particular strata scheme is that the way they financed doing solar and batteries for their apartment building, they actually went out and raised a special levy and financed doing this project to do a 38 kilowatt solar system with 26.6 kilowatt hour batteries. And to give you an idea, for a combined solar and battery project, this is just for the common areas of the building, we're looking at about 6.8 years payback on that case study. Now, this is another example from Greater Sydney, where this is a strata complex that's got 24 Tesla Powerwall batteries in one room. They're actually installed in a domino effect, 3 deep against the wall. And this is an example of implementing a larger amount of battery storage into a strata complex. Now, we should mention an innovation from the company called Illum Energy, that came out of Melbourne University about 7 years ago. And they've created this solar sharing system. You can see these white boxes here that are called the Sol Share. Now, this is a technology that allows you to install a single solar system on the rooftop of an apartment building and then connect that solar system into 15 apartments for each of these white boxes. So this building here has 17 apartments, so they've got 2 of the sharing boxes so that solar can be shared into each of the individual apartments in that particular strata complex. And you can see 2 inverters there as well. So we've now got technologies. We've seen buildings in Sydney install up to 4 of these. So apartment buildings with up to 60 units have bought 4 of these boxes and shared solar systems and solar power into the individual apartments to help with further electrification of the individual apartments. And if we just move out to the Northern Beaches, there's a little case study here of the Edgewater building, 32 lots. And this building actually has 2 solar systems on the roof of it. One is for the common areas of the building, and the other solar system is for solar sharing into the apartments. But what we'll point out here is that the solar sharing is on a user pays opt-in basis, and just 22 out of the 32 lots decided to pay for a share of the solar system that would connect to into their private apartment meter. And also they had 2 levels of buy-in. So each of those 22 apartments could either buy a 1.5 kilowatt share or a 2.5 kilowatt share of the shared solar system that connects into the individual apartments. So now we're going to talk a bit more about heat pumps. We had a look at them in the context of, say, a townhouse earlier, where you might use a townhouse use a heat pump for creating hot water for an individual townhouse, which is at ground level. Now let's just dig into the concept of a heat pump a little bit more. So this diagram shows the difference between solar photovoltaic, solar thermal, and a heat pump. So remember, a heat pump is actually capturing heat that's stored in the air and funneling that into, by way of use of a refrigerant and a heat exchanger. It's funneling that into the water. It's different from what we previously might have been familiar with, which is called solar thermal panels. If people are familiar with, say, the Solar Heart brand, a heat pump is not that. It's this reverse cycle air conditioning technology applied to heating water. And a heat pump is different from solar panels, which create electricity, but you can have both solar panels and a heat pump operating in tandem, in conjunction, to get the lowest cost hot water, because heat pumps use some electricity, and then if you reduce the cost of electricity by installing a solar system, you're getting to the cheapest hot water. So when we talk about heat pumps, we quite often talk about something called the coefficient of performance, or the COP. And to give you an idea, gas boilers might have a COP of 0.75, and now there are some heat pumps on the market that have a COP of 6. So what that means is more than 80% of the heat source of heating the water is coming from that air temperature being captured, and it's much more efficient. Now, in New South Wales, we've got a gas distribution monopoly. It's called Gemina. The company Gemina is owned by the State Grid of China and Singapore Power. And gas distribution is a monopoly in strata in New South Wales. However, if we switch to electric heat pumps, then we can actually move off that gas distribution monopoly, and we're not paying a high flagful for metering charges when we move off that gas distribution network. So why would you put heat pumps into apartment buildings? Basically, you're getting some free energy. You're capturing that from the air temperature. You're lowering your bills. you're reducing your fossil fuel reliance and you're reducing carbon emissions. So just to give people a little bit of an idea, just say you've got a common hot water plant for your apartment building. If that common hot water plant was based around electric storage technology and there were 40 units in the building, you'd pay about $60 of electricity a day. If you used a gas storage hot water system, you'd be paying about $40 a day for hot water across 40 apartments. And electric heat pump, you'd be paying about $20 a day. If you had an electric heat pump with solar PV, you'd be down to about $15 a day. And this chart here just shows basically whatever your setup of common hot water inside an apartment building, whether it's one of these, we want to try and get to these target ones down here. And to give you a gauge as to how much you'll pay for hot water for an entire year inside a single apartment. With a heat pump, you can get it down to 180, or with heat pump and solar, potentially as low as $140 to heat all your hot water for an entire year. So if we want to see a good case study, a fantastic one is done by Brian Peck up at 16 Freeman Road in Chatswood. This is a strata building that retrofitted a 30 kilowatt solar system on the roof. And they also put a heat pump in. We'll have a look at that in a second. And they've got hot water down to $180 per year for each of the 44 apartments. So this is the heat pump, a Mitsubishi Qton heat pump that's outside the hot water room. And inside the hot water room, you've got these storage tanks storing up the hot water to use. And they don't run the heat pump between midnight and dawn, so there's no noise from the heat pump during that time. If we move into a little bit closer in North Sydney, this is a building that came through the Future Proofing Apartments program that North Sydney Council's been running. It's a smaller apartment building with just 5 lots in it, but they put a 10 kilowatt solar system in, and they put reclaim energy heat pumps in, and they've electrified this apartment building of 5 apartments. And if we just jump over to Glebe, here's 2 blocks of 24 apartments, and they've retrofitted solar panels onto the rooftops of those 2 buildings. And they put 4 reclaim energy heat pumps, and they've got 5 hot water storage tanks in there. So they've completely electrified this apartment building and disconnected gas where this used to have a gas hot water boiler. Now, just to give you a little bit of an idea as how we're progressing, there are about 2,200 strata buildings in the North Sydney area. They're shown by the blue dots on this screen, and the yellow dots are the strata buildings in North Sydney that have implemented solar on those strata buildings, probably about 34 that we're aware of that have now got solar installed. Now, we'll just point out a problem when you try and transition a common hot water system from gas to electric. And we're dubbing this robo-gas. And this has happened to a couple of apartment buildings, early adopters in the North Sydney area. For example, 24 Yeo Street in Neutral Bay was one example. After retrofitting out, getting rid of the gas hot water storage system and implementing a heat pump, the gas distribution network wants to keep billing people inside that strata building for the gas that they're no longer using. And also some of these buildings are getting quoted some high amounts for disconnecting hot water meters, or just, there might be $165 per apartment to disconnect a hot water meter, or if you've moved your common gas hot water to electric heat pump, and then inside your own apartment you've also moved to an induction cooktop, and you want to get rid of your old gas meter for your individual apartment. Some people have been quoted like $2,000 for removal of that gas meter that you no longer need. So don't worry, environmental defenders, Saul Griffiths are on this, they're investigating it, and over time it should be easier to do these retrofits and get rid of the issues of continuing to be billed for gas after you've switched to electrification of your apartment building. Now, we'll just talk a bit about EVs. We're crossing into some of the tipping points. It's been, for a while, it's been cheaper to run an EV than run an internal combustion engine vehicle. But we're also getting close now to the point where it's going to be cheaper to buy some EVs. And in particular, you'll see some EVs from companies like BYD coming into the market that are really competitive with their internal combustion engine counterparts. So let's just have a look at another case study here of an apartment building. And this time it's over the harbour in the city of Sydney. It's at Rhodes House in Camperdown. It's on Parramatta Road. And this is an apartment building that's actually set up electric vehicle charging backbone such that any vehicle in the car park area in this building can install an EV charge point. So they've got all the backbone infrastructure in place. That means these are contactors that connect to the fire control panel that allow all EV charging to be stopped in the event of a fire. These are new distribution boards in the car park area, permanent electricity monitoring device. You've got 9 new subboards throughout the car park area. You've got these flat cables running along the roof behind the car spaces, and you can chop into one of these and install your charge point when you're ready behind your own individual lot car parking space. And then they've got a shared fast charger, a DC fast charger, out in the visitor car parking area. This is another building that's electrified with electric vehicles. It's the Altair at Potts Point. 165 car spaces are enabled for EV charging in this building. They've got dynamic load balancing equipment in there and Wi-Fi connectivity for all the EV charging. So this is an example of an EV charge point on a pylon. They've got these new cable trays that allow you to run cables back to the distribution boards. And in the main switch room, you've got this dynamic load balancing equipment. This is another example of EV charging backbone. It's the Richmond building in Piedmont. And again, 106 car spaces are able to set up EV charging. And they've also got, they've installed EV charge points in all 12 of their visitor car spaces. So this is one of the owners with charging his vehicle from one of the shared EV charge points in the visitor car parking. And these are new distribution boards and new network boxes that are installed on 3 floors of basement car park to enable that. They've got 2 choices of charge point. They can use Jet Charge, ChargeMate, or Tesla Generation 3. And a really great example of electrification of transport in a strata building is the Zinc building at Alexandria. And they've got solar-powered EV charging in the strata building. So they've got this common area solar system, solar array on the rooftop. They've installed these Tesla charge points throughout the car parking area, and during the day, if there's any excess solar and you try and charge your vehicle, you can actually get solar power into your electric vehicle there. Now, we've talked about a wide range of different technologies. You've got to be careful when you're choosing installers for your strata buildings. Make sure that they're accredited, particularly if they're in the solar area. What's their experience like working with strata? Are they a stable company that's been around for several years? And can you talk to some of their other strata customers before they install in your particular strata building? And it's very important to get these companies to visit your block and not do remote quoting. A lot of strata buildings run into issues particularly if a solar installer tries to quote remotely and they don't get all the data. You need them to come on the ground in your building and have a look at your setup so that you get accurate quotes that you can trust when you take to your annual general meeting or extraordinary general meeting. We'll just mention, for a couple of years now, we've had the New South Wales Government Sustainability Infrastructure Amendment to the New South Wales Strata Schemes Act, and that applies to any sustainability upgrade, whether it's reducing energy or water consumption, getting rid of pollution, getting rid of waste, improving recycling, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, or facilitating sustainable transport. It also applies to voting on the method by which a strata finances doing any of the above. So if you're voting on a special levy, on taking out a strata loan, on taking out a power purchase agreement, then you're also able to operate at this 50% of unit entitlements threshold. If not more than 50% of those that vote are against it, the motion will carry and you'll be able to proceed with your project. So one other thing we've got to keep in mind, what are the strata committee archetypes which we need to get these projects that will electrify our buildings over the line? We need the bean counter, we need the engineer, and the sustainability champion. We used to call it the greenie, but now we call it the sustainability champion. But it's important to also have a balance of the person that's able to dig into the numbers and look at the return on investment, look at the payback, but also the property valuation uplift, and the engineer to help with explaining the new technologies to the people in your apartment building. And finally, one of the things that we want to emphasize is getting these energy features as we electrify our apartments whether it's inside our apartment or in the common areas of the building, results in property valuation uplift at the individual apartment level. And if you want a guide as to the difference, this is from a Domain study in 2022. Imagine that you've gone on this journey of complete electrification of your apartment building, and there's a twin apartment building that didn't go through that electrification process. In every other respect, they're the same as your building. You could expect every apartment in the electrified, decarbonised apartment building to be worth $72,000 more than the equivalent sized apartment that hasn't gone through the electrification and decarbonisation process. So what's that? It's a 12.7% property valuation uplift at the individual apartment level if you are able to completely electrify your apartment building. So we've got a little bit of further information here, but I'm now happy to pass back to Jordan, and we can take some questions. Jordan, are you there?
Yes, thanks, Brent. If you could maybe stop sharing your presentation, and then thank you for that. That's fantastic information. A ton of good options on the individual lot level, and also as the for common area. I suppose I'm happy to kick things off with questions. If you do have a question, feel free to send it through in the Q&A. And we'll happily answer that. But you did initially mention about sort of individual lot electricity load, maximum amps. I'm wondering how do people find out what that is for their own unit?
Yeah, so the first thing to do is go and hunt for your meter board, and some people have never seen the meter board, and find out where your individual apartment meter is. And quite often there'll be a breaker, and you can just read off. There's a number on that electricity breaker that starts with a C, and if it says C20, then you know you've got 20 amps, or 43 amps, or 63 amps, or And the vast majority of our apartment buildings have single phase, but a couple of maybe our high-end townhouses might have three phase for each individual apartment. So if you've got, some of our apartments will actually have three different meters, one for each phase, or two phases and a controlled load hot water meter for their electric hot water. Yeah. But hunt for the meter board and try and find where it is.
The number starting with C.
The number starting with C. Yeah.
Okay, got you. I suppose, and so did you say that induction cooktops are about 20 amps? Is that
They
right,
can
on
start
average?
from 20,
Okay.
and go up to about 43. So so a lot of our apartment buildings have about 63 amps for each apartment.
Yep, great. Also, I was wondering about individual apartments and common area. There was a lot of options that you sort of discussed. Best bang for buck, if you had to pick one for each, where would you sort of start?
Look, I think the thing that you've got best bang for buck actually probably pushes you to buying an electric vehicle, and trying to get that charging in your apartment building. The induction cooktops is the thing that you have the most control over, but it's not actually the best bang for buck project. And some people if you think about items that have a better bang for buck, moving from a gas heater to reverse cycle air conditioning and using that for heating. And if you think about it, a lot of our apartment buildings that were built earlier on don't have reverse cycle air conditioners for each apartment today. And some of those buildings will hit a supply problem when people start to put more in. But remember, for heating, a really good bang for buck is to use the reverse cycle air conditioning.
Yep.
Don't think of it as just for cooling. And, people that have a reverse cycle air conditioner, then they go and they use another form of heating because they think that, the gas heater or the, electric bar heater or whatever in their apartment is a better way. If you've got the reverse cycle air conditioner, use it for heating. Don't use the gas bayonet for heating.
Yeah, great. Last question from me before we get to the other participants' questions, just about you mentioned the RoboGas.
Yep.
So if people are looking at disconnecting, so what do they actually do? I mean, I know it's being contested, but on a practical level now, what should they sort of do?
Look, I think enough people have started the conversion process, and if you're working in strata, if you're in a strata building and you start the process now of applying for putting these technologies in, I think that's going to be worked out by the time that you get. Remember, all these things have to have an approval in the strata land, and they just don't happen overnight. With the exception of an induction, well, even if you've got enough supply for the induction cooktop and you don't have to run a new line down to your meter board for it, then you can do that with privacy without applying to the strata. If you want to install a reverse cycle air conditioner, you do need an application to strata. You'll have to show that the noise of it's not too high, etc., and it could be a change to the look of the building. So you need the approval there. But I wouldn't hold off on the electrification process. But the RoboGas issue really applies mainly where we've got common hot water plants that were gas, and then the whole building's trying to electrify that and get off it. And so that project itself is probably 18 months to 2 years to get that through your strata committee.
Okay, I suppose there's a lot of steps before buildings get to that in the first place. So, but good to know it's been sort of contested for sure, because it seems pretty outrageous to me. So, we do have a question about the sort of the opt-in framework. I think, was that related to EdgeView?
So the case study we brought up earlier, yes, they use the Illume Energy Sol Share to share the solar in that building. And the reason we put it up as a case study is If there are a few people that are not interested in maybe an owner investor that doesn't want to participate, it's great to see a case study. Well, this building, you can come up with a model. It might be user pays bylaws, and that's just a subset of people that want the solar connected to their apartment, that get it. The subset of people that want that property valuation uplift can get it. They can't be blocked by the people that don't want it.
Love it. I think that's a fantastic solution, especially as the guest mentioned that, there might be some blockers, but that's a great way to sort of work around them. So, yeah,
Yeah.
fantastic. So does that mean that they have to share the initial sort of costs, though, that might be related to any common areas, or would
Well,
the...
no,
Hmm,
you actually can just do that for the apartments and not connect the Illume
yeah,
Solar
great.
Shed to any of the to the common areas. So
Yep.
if you've got a common area meter and 20 apartments, if you get a buying group of 12 people that just want to do a shared solar into their own apartments, just don't touch the common area. Yeah.
Yep. We've got a question from Kate,
Yeah.
just more about a comment on New South Wales gas is privatised. Saying, is it?
Yeah, this is related to the
Mm,
issue of New South Wales being more complicated than Victoria.
mm,
So, the privatisation of the gas distribution network was done by the New South Wales state government. And so so this robo-gas issue that we've got in New South Wales is not affecting people in, say, Victoria or Queensland when they're moving to heat pumps to the same extent
mm,
as we've got it here in New South Wales. And it's absolutely a great state policy issue. And if you want, or even you can raise it, at a federal issue, at a federal level, because Saul Griffith estimated that it would add $7 billion to the cost of electrifying Australia.
yeah, yeah. It definitely seems like maybe because of that connection there that it's not as upfront and on the agenda as it is in other states for sure.
Yeah.
Is there
ACT's done it, yeah, terrific job, and we've got to take our hats off to them. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's fantastic to know that other states have done it, and we've got a roadmap. So hopefully, that will change in the future. Is there any support from council or co-funding for heritage buildings? That's an interesting one.
Look, Jordan, maybe we've got to flip this back to someone in council. The, the key thing that we've got to remember, if we've got a heritage building, and you want to put solar panels on it, uh, you typically can't get approval for putting the solar panels on any facade of the building that can be viewed from the street level. But on a heritage building, and depending on the orientation of your building, if the roof can't be seen from the normal street level, then you should be good to get approval for normal solar panels. But the other thing is, for the heritage buildings, I think what will be great is when the solar tiles become viable and a little bit more cost effective. And then you'll be able to roll solar onto a roof with just a normal tile, and people won't actually know that it's solar panels, and it won't affect the aesthetic of the heritage building.
Yep, yep. There's a question from Stephanie that where was it? Sorry. At the beginning, you mentioned that the standalone heat pump was the alternative solution.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I'll just recap on this. So here's the tricky thing. Um, the thing you've got to do for your own apartment building is identify whether you've got your own hot water service or whether you're sharing a hot water service with other people in the townhouse or apartment complex. And so we were trying to start at the start of the presentation with the things that you have the control to do yourself. And we looked at it from the perspective of, say, a ground floor townhouse owner that might already have like a gas storage hot water system in their courtyard. And so if you're at ground level, you can do an individual heat pump. But if you're on a second, third, 10th floor, of an apartment building and you've got individual hot water service, it's likely that you've already got an individual electric hot water service, maybe in the laundry or under the sink of an older 70s or 80s building. But where you get stuck is if it's a more modern building that was built in the last 10, 15 years, and you've got an instant gas hot water service for your own individual apartment that might be on, you're visible on your balcony. We haven't seen someone come up with a good retrofit option for getting that switched over to electric at this point. And you can't do heat pumps where you don't have fresh air and access to ventilation, because the heat pumps need to be able to suck in that warm air. And you could potentially do it if you were a top floor apartment and there's a concrete slab above your top floor apartment, then you might be able to do a heat pump for your individual apartment. But the people that are sort of in the middle of the apartment building, if you're not going to be able to do heat pumps, from the second floor to the second top floor of the apartment building. Yeah.
Right. Good to know. A couple more questions and I think we'll wrap up. Question from Karen around having difficult buildings, which is quite common across for strata. What's the sort of first step in about engaging some help and assistance with that? And what should they do?
Look, well, if they're in the North Sydney area, reach out to the Future Proofing Apartments program. Come down to events like the Living Futures Festival, get to meet installers that might be at that event. Speak to other similar strata buildings in your street that might have done some of these projects, and then go back to the archetypes that you need a group. You need, ideally you need the bean counter, you need the engineer, and you need the passionate sustainability champion, and try and create a subcommittee or at least a group of people that is very difficult for one person to push and be the solo person to get these electrification projects over the line. So it's always got to be a team effort. You've got to do some community building, get a few other people on the same page, and try and build the groundswell of support.
Yep, definitely. And it certainly helps for those in North Sydney. But you can, for those who aren't, you can certainly engage Wattblock as well. But to have a business case that can be shared, that is created from a building assessment that Wattblock will do, very, very helpful and a great sort of way to start the conversation.
And there are also some free tools as well that we should point out. The APVI, Australian PV Institute, has a free online solar calculator, which you can get like a basic solar assessment for free. New South Wales government also did a free EV calculator to try and work out the cost of the backbone. So look for a couple of those free calculators to try and get the ball rolling as well.
Yep. We'll include those as links in the email follow-up tomorrow. Final question from Stephanie about refrigerants. Some of them are very harmful. Are there new heat pumps now with natural refrigerant?
So great question, because if we really want to be looking at the whole of life, what's best from an environmental perspective, we want the refrigerants in the heat pumps to actually, if, for example, we can't rely on people to take those gases out of the heat pumps when they're decommissioned. They'll just end up in landfill. So we showed a case study earlier in this webinar of 16 Freeman Road in Chatswood, Brian Peck's building, the Serenity building. They've got a Mitsubishi Qton heat pump, which actually uses CO2 as a refrigerant. Now, that is actually the most environmentally friendly refrigerant. And it's not generating CO2 as it operates. It's just got a certain set of CO2 that's built into it when it's constructed. And then if that ends up in landfill after it's been used for 15 years, then just some CO2 escapes into the atmosphere, and it's a tiny amount. So it's more than paid off its carbon debt by the time it releases that. So,
yeah. So so if they're heading down that road, they can just that information will be listed on the quote. Is that right? Or
Yeah, like on the data sheet, you can see what the
data
type
sheet?
of refrigerant is, and you want to look for natural refrigerants, and say CO2 is the most natural.
Yep, great. Brent, will you be at living? You'll be talking and speaking at the workshop. Will you also be doing staying around for and
Yeah,
just talking on that?
we'll be
Yeah.
able to catch a few people after we do our talks at Living Futures
Yep.
Festival down on the North Sydney Council stand. So that's another opportunity to come down to the coal loader and have a look at all the great stuff, all the great sustainability stuff down there. You can
Yep.
see a heat pump, you can see a battery, solar system, solar panels, onyx solar photovoltaic glass, as well as ideas for composting and building out your worm farm and getting your community vegetable garden going.
Yep, that's right. Thanks, Brent. And yeah, so Brent will be also speaking as part of our talk series, and then yeah, at the council table there. So taking any questions around sustainable strata, really. So also we've already mentioned, but future proofing apartment program. If you're in North Sydney, and you're not part of the program, it really is a good first step. So sign up. We'll send out a link to the program in the follow-up tomorrow. Otherwise, thank you, Brent, for your presentation. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. We'll send out the recording and the slides. And please feel free to get in touch if you've got any questions, and we're here to help. So thanks for joining us, everyone, and have a good night.
Thanks, Jordan.
Okay. Good night, everyone.